We got cool jobs. We do cool things. Our work should be magical. Welcome to STEMdenity. I'm your host, Anna Hodshire. We work really hard and our jobs shouldn't suck. Let's dive in. Of the 5 jobs I've had in 5 years, I have had to formally apply to one of them. Now, I have sent out many job applications to many jobs, but every single other job that I got was more of an informal networking type situation where I was encouraged to go in for a job and basically all was asked of me was maybe a updated resume or CV, nothing too fancy. But the one job that I did need to formally apply for and I did receive was my current tenure track faculty position as an assistant professor at Colorado State University. And it was incredibly stressful. It was a big package. It had several different pieces that were required. I spent a ton of time on it. And I think it was worth it. I got the job. So apparently I did all right. I don't think it was just because of my job applications, but I do think that the job application, especially the package when you're going in for a competitive job, it's important. It is your chance to make a first impression if the people on the other end, the organization on the other end don't know you, or if they know you slightly or very well, it's a way to still convey, hey, this is who I believe I am for your position. Because when you're submitting a job application package, you're trying to convey one or more key parts of your STEM identities in a quick and concise and readable and pleasant fashion. I also know that we're living in a world where a lot of companies and organizations are moving towards AI screening for at least first cuts at job applications. So certainly I want to address that as we go along. But for many STEM jobs, tenure track positions, small companies, etc., at some point, a real human is going to review your application if it makes any, say, pre-screening cuts. Even the tenure track position, there's a minimum qualifications screening where a real person does go through and ensures that each application reaches the minimum qualifications, or maybe 2 people do that. At my university, it's usually 2 people who do that for these larger jobs, say a tenure track position or a director position or other administrative professional type positions at the university. You have to reach the minimum qualifications, and then people for real start reading through your package. So I've had the opportunity, even though I haven't had to apply formally to many jobs, I've gotten to be on the other end. I've gotten to review lots of applications, both on formal job panels at large organization, the university I work at now, and at small companies where it's a little less formal. Maybe you just have a few people that you already know that you're encouraging to apply, but you still get in a few, cold collar type applications. Maybe you don't know who might be applying for a job. So I want to focus on what I feel as a real human who reviews lots of job applications, what I feel really works for me. And of course, I'm just one person, and I really encourage you when you're going out for an important job that you're excited about to get lots of opinions, as many opinions as you can. I found for myself, I thrive best when I can get advice from as many people as possible for big situations. I got as many people as possible to review my tenure track package and give me advice and talk to even about having the job before I even decided to apply for the job. I had totally different example. I had an interpersonal conflict issue a few months ago. I talked to as many people as possible before, during, and after so that I could become better at interpersonal conflict because that's something I'm very avoidant on. I hate it, dislike it very much. I love getting different perspectives and then integrating what works for me and then tossing out what doesn't work with me, right? People are excited to give you tons and tons and tons of advice. Some people could give you advice all day long. Other people are better at, hey, here's the top 3 things that I found helpful for me. And out of even those top 3 things, maybe only one of them resonates. Out of that day-long advice, maybe 5 of those things resonated. So this is me trying to give you things that hopefully will resonate for you when it comes to job applications. But again, talk to other people. So let's dive right in. The tools that I think of when I think of job applications. So the first one is balancing the right amount of content. Use the space you're given, but don't abuse the space you're given. Some job applications, but not all, will have multiple pieces of content they ask for. Most common is a cover letter and a CV. And then other jobs, say a tenure track position, might have additional things like, say, a teaching statement, other things like that, or research statements. Maybe you're going for a scientific position at, say, a national lab. They might want sort of research statements, etc. Use the space you're given, but don't abuse the space you're given. Read through the application to understand if there are any page limits. Use those page limits. Do not go over those page limits. Now, that part's pretty easy. Most people are pretty good if you tell them you get 3 pages to do your research statement. They buckle down like, okay, 3 pages, I can do this. And they start writing and writing, and they're like, well, I've done so much cool research, and I can't possibly constrain myself to 3 normal pages, but what if I use 11.2 font? They're not going to notice the difference too much between, say, 12 font and 11.2 font. And that gives me like 4 more lines. Oh, what if I use a 0.75-inch margin? Oh, what if I use a 0.5-inch margin? Now I've got everything I wanted in the space I was given, the 3 pages. That 3-page limit is sort of a implied, also follow the other rules of being a reasonable human being writing up an application, which is use the 1-inch margin, use a readable font size. I'm especially picky about the 1-inch margin. I had an experience where I had about 80 applications to review on a job panel recently, and it was actually a pretty enjoyable experience. I liked getting this big breadth of all of these interesting people who have all these different backgrounds and kind of seeing the overlaps in research and yet the unique things they do in research. And it was pretty cool. Some people did not use 1-inch margins. They used, say, 1/2-inch margin, maybe 0.75-inch margin. And I was actually quite surprised to learn that I could not actually read the wider widths on the page efficiently. We're very used to a 1-inch margin. That's basically what everything is set up to be, unless it's a newspaper or journal. And there you have even smaller columns, right? You can really quickly just read, find the next line. When people used less than a 1-inch margin, I would try to find the next line while reading quickly because I had a lot to get through, and these packages were dense. I wanted to give them a very fair shake, each package. I couldn't find the next line. I was constantly getting lost in their application material, and it made it frustrating. It made me not really want to keep reviewing, even though I did, right? It just made me not want to, which is never a great way to get past, the first stage of screening. So use reasonable rules. Don't use a tiny font, use margins, and just self-edit. You've done a lot of really cool things. Try to convey that the best you can. Usually you're given the opportunity to present your CV, and in your CV, you can list every single major project. You can list every single publication you're on. You can list every single presentation you've given. That starts to give your reviewer that sense of all of the cool stuff that you've done. Now, in your actual package, focus on, for say, you're making something like a research statement, focus on what does this job that I'm applying to care about the most? If it's, say, a professor position at a university, you're showing that you have a successful research program, and you're going to build this successful research program into something crazy successful. Maybe you're going for a company and you don't have the opportunity to do anything beyond a cover letter and a CV or a resume in your package. Okay, great. In your cover letter, in like 2 sentences or less, convey that you have this incredible, successful track record of research. In a few sentences, convey that you have this vision for how you're going to contribute to the company's goals. In your resume or CV, especially if you have a resume, which is usually short, 1, 2, maybe 3 pages at max, whereas your CV is usually really long, depending on how much you've done. It shows all of the things you've done over time that you think are relevant. There's that section at the top. I can't remember what it's called because I don't think about this that often, but it's usually something like statement of purpose or whatever. And you can just look up resume templates and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's right at the top. And it's usually just, you can write a few phrases of what you get excited about. So that's where you can start to convey, hey, this is where, use the phrases you think are going to be most relevant to the position you're applying to. Another thing with balancing the right amount of content is to think about how to clearly explain your research. When I was reviewing that really large chunk of applications, around 80, during the research statement portion, very few people bothered to explain their research in plain language. They just dived in. Many people were working in AI research fields, and it honestly felt like it was just a bunch of AI buzzwords. It probably would have made sense to people who did fairly similar research to what they did, but it did not make sense to me. And I found that somewhat frustrating because the position that these people were applying to also had a teaching component. And when they just made their research really dense and impossible to understand, it made me feel like they weren't going to be a fantastic teacher as well. Some people did a really nice job explaining their research very concisely and briefly, just, here's what this main buzzy word term means. And then they kind of dive into the more details. Just taking that time to make sure that this makes sense to someone who is well educated but doesn't do the same things you do, right? Think about who is reviewing. It's probably going to be people who are somewhat your peers but do not have your precise background. The next tool, big chunk of things to think about, is making your package visually appealing. And there's all sorts of templates online. This is not something I excel in. I do kind of like doing my own formatting just because I find templates, I break them too easily. I don't know what my deal is, but I get in there and I don't know, mess up the formatting somehow. And it's really frustrating. But I just try to keep things clean and consistent. When you have the opportunity to hand in a package that includes at least a cover letter, maybe some other written statements, but be careful about how you use ways to emphasize key text, like italics, bold, acronyms. So let's pick apart each one of those. Italics, again, maybe this is a me thing, but imagine that your reviewer has many applications to review. The job you're going for, it's a cool job, probably lots of people applied. Italics are surprisingly hard to read, especially when someone is reading relatively quickly. And it depends on the font package you're using. I don't know if it's a sans serif versus serif thing or what, but do have a couple people say, hey, I've written up this thing and I'm using some italics. Can you just read this as fast as you possibly can and let me know if there's maybe don't signal them to the italics. Maybe just say, can you read this thing as fast as you possibly can? Let me know if there's anywhere where you stumbled, you struggled. And that's where you're going to start getting this sort of, hey, maybe the italics were hard to read, or you didn't use your 1-inch margin. Yes, I know I keep ranting on that one, but really, guys, it was crazy to me how hard it was to read the packages without the 1-inch margins. So just don't be that person. Don't set yourself up for failure out the gate. Using bold. I love it when people use bold to quickly draw my attention to a couple of key phrases or key statements within a page. So let's say that you have a 3-page, we're going to use the research statement again. You have a 3-page research statement that you get to turn in. Try to not have more than about 3-ish bold statements per page. If you're using bold every other word, every other sentence, now it means nothing. And it's just, I don't even know what I'm supposed to look at. And I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I'm fatigued. You are over tiring out your reviewer when you overuse bold. And then finally, acronyms. Define all your acronyms. I know that we know this, but it's also easy to forget. And try to redefine them if you have multiple pieces of the package you're putting together. So let's say you have a cover letter, you have a research statement, you have a CV. Define key acronyms in your cover letter and research statement, and potentially even in your CV, so that the person reviewing, maybe they're reviewing out of order. Maybe they love starting with the research statement and then going back to the cover letter, right? It's just up to them. So you don't assume that they're going to remember from your cover letter what your acronyms mean. And finally, use consistent formatting throughout. Again, I mentioned there's templates for a lot of these things. You're welcome to use templates, but if you do use a template, use the same template for your cover letter and your CV and everything else. When people hand in this particular job application that I'm thinking of with a bunch of applicants, there were about 5 pieces of material that people needed to have. And many people use consistent formatting throughout, and that's fantastic. It felt very cohesive, very pleasing, not fatiguing to read. But a few people had every single piece was in some different formatting. The font used was different. The font size was a little shifted. The margins were a little weird. How they were doing headers it was just confusing, and it made it hard and slower to actually understand what they were trying to say. Okay, next step. We live in a world of AI. I know many people use AI to assist with their writing, and that's okay, but do be very careful with how you use generative AI. For one of the reviews I was on, generative AI was caught on one particular statement and it lost another reviewer's trust for the entire package. I didn't happen to catch it. Other reviewer has a much longer teaching record than I do. And I think, frankly, the more people are teaching nowadays, probably the better they are at catching those AI things. I'm starting to do the same thing where I noticed just quirky phrasing in a student's paper, and I'm like, I don't think a human would have said that. So I'm pretty certain that was generative AI. So if you're using generative AI, do try to ensure that it's still you formulating the majority of the ideas, the majority of what you're doing. Many positions out there are not that excited that you know how to use generative AI. They're excited that you know what you're doing and that you can write and you can communicate. The next tip, this is going to seem really obvious, but it's just, don't forget, do you understand the key components of the job and can you address them? So this is you very carefully reviewing the job posting and then saying, okay, job posting appears, let's say it's for a machine learning scientist position. If you have very little background in machine learning, this position is probably going to be a struggle of a fit for you. And that's a side note that I've noticed a little bit when I'm helping my students who are about to graduate and they're looking for jobs, is the mindset transition between school and your next job. So when you're going into a postdoctoral research position outside of grad school, I think that there is still that acceptance that you don't have all the skills or many of the skills that the person is looking for when they're hiring their postdoc. They do expect you to have some amount of the skills. However, when you're going to industry or perhaps a big university position, whether it's an administrative position, a faculty position, whatever, that's when your opportunity to say, hey, I'm pretty smart and I'm a pretty fast learner. I don't know anything about most of what you're doing for this job. That is not going to fly as well. So going back to that, machine learning scientist type position, let's say that this is at an industry position and you didn't do any machine learning in grad school, but you're about to graduate, you have a PhD, you're like, gosh, I'm smart, I'm quick, I can learn things quickly. Surely I'm a good candidate from this job. Probably from the perspective of the company, unless you have a lot of networking insights, they know you really well, they're encouraging you to apply for this position. If they don't know you very well, and even if they do, they really are most often looking for someone who has machine learning experience. Industry doesn't quite have the same margins, the same ability to train people from scratch. When you go to grad school, you're expected to be trained from scratch. I went to grad school. I didn't know how to code. I didn't really know how to do research. I kind of knew how to code a little bit, but I barely had any real skills to be a researcher. And then I got 5 years to be trained over time to become a researcher. It was great. When you go to your first job out of school, most often you're expected to have some set of base skills that address the job that you are applying to. That's not to say that you won't have opportunities to learn and grow in your job at your company or your organization. And hopefully you do. If you're not learning and growing in your current job at your current organization, is that the job for you? Do you enjoy that? Some people completely fine. You're like, it's just a job. You have other passions outside of work and you want to be able to spend your time and energy and focus on those other passions. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And we really need to normalize that sometimes a job is just a job. But not everyone feels that way. And especially a lot of people who are going to grad school, especially getting a PhD, their job they don't want their job to just feel like a job. They want their job to feel like it's impacting the world in a positive way. They want to feel like they are impacting the world in a positive way. I want to feel like I'm impacting the world in a positive way. I don't want to work 80 hours a week. I almost never do. Do I ever work 80 hours a week? I don't think I've ever worked 80 hours a week. Okay, well, that's an aside. Anyways, I don't want to work all the time, but I still want my work to matter. So we want to be able to, for the most part, learn and grow in our position, but we need to be able to walk in with that base set of skills that make sure that the company can be successful by hiring us almost right away. So ensure that you understand what are the key parts of the job and make sure that you're emphasizing your previous experience on those key parts and your future plan for how you're going to continue to be successful on those key parts. The next piece is how can you help the reviewer actually connect to your application? It's really helpful if you can personalize your application. It's pretty easy to tell, and some STEM career positions are maybe entry level or they're generic enough that a generic application is absolutely fine. But other positions are much more specific. Maybe it's a small company, maybe it's a university, but it's a department position. How can you make a personalized connection to that small company, to that department? How can you see yourself working in that company or department? How can you express that you understand or have any understanding of the department or organization? Some questions you could ask yourself, say it's a department and you're going for a faculty position. Do they teach undergrads or not? I saw many applications on a recent review that indicated excitement to teach undergraduates, but our department doesn't actually have an undergraduate program. You also might want to speak to classes that you think that you can teach, and that does include understanding the base level of knowledge that you need to have to teach that certain class. So this is where having connections, someone to speak to before you even submit your application is really helpful if possible, to start to understand what does this organization prioritize? What does this department do? Who do they serve? What is the organization's goals over the next few years? That kind of thing. And then reflects that in your application package so that people read it and they say, hey, that's exciting. I can see this person working here. Another piece is how can you show appropriate maturity for the job? You might be going for a job that you feel, hey, this is a bit of a stretch for me, or I know that many people that get this type of job have been working outside of school for more years than I have. I kind of see two different routes taken by very early career people when they're applying for a more senior position. And one route, it honestly feels like resume stuffing. I hope that for them it's not. I hope that they are actually pursuing lots of things they're excited about. But it comes off as dozens of extracurriculars. You're working all the time. You have zero work-life balance. You're probably really stressed. And I'm honestly a little concerned for you at this point. I'm like, are you going to burn out in 2 years because you were go, 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 go throughout school and you probably did put in 80 hours a week? And is that who you are as a person? Can you sustain that long term? Because there are a few people, not a few, there's a small percentage of people out there who do seem to be so completely driven and motivated by their work that they can work endless hours and it brings them endless joy. I'm not one of those people, and I've not met too many of those people. So it does concern me when it feels like you have just spread yourself too thin. Maturity isn't busyness, it's being able to show that you're quite good at what you do and you have a plan for expansion and breadth. Maturity, for me, when I'm looking for maturity in an application, it's showing that you understand why your work matters and how you could extend it to the future. These are tricky things to convey. And this is, again, where I really encourage you to go find people who have the position that you want to get and talk to them, especially if you feel like you're a little junior or a little unprepared for the position. Find those excellent mentors who can really help you out here. Ask, do you feel like I'm showing the appropriate maturity? How can I think about this? And maybe even brainstorm. Like some of us are really, I'm one of these people. I excel best when I brainstorm a little bit by myself, but then I brainstorm a lot with other key people who I think have great ideas. And then they have an interesting idea, and I can take that interesting idea, and then I go back and I quietly brainstorm around it, and I expand that interesting idea out and into something that perhaps neither of us even foresaw before we started the exercise. So this wraps up to have trusted individuals review your positions. When I finally went for that tenure track position and I had to submit a big package, I had several people who were already in tenure track positions, mostly tenured by that time, review my material. They gave me great advice. It was very helpful. It made me feel a lot more confident about what I was doing. And certainly my job application, it had some mistakes in it. Looking back, I reviewed it recently just out of curiosity. And one of the mistakes I had is that I overestimated my ability to teach certain core classes that require a lot more kind of classic systems engineering knowledge than I actually have. And, maybe it was commented on in the review panel, but it didn't sink me. People decided, she doesn't quite understand what is needed to teach to C501, but it's fine. She has other skills, right? So as I started off the episode, when you're submitting a job application package, you are trying to convey one or usually multiple key parts of your STEM identities. And you want this to be quick, concise, exciting, connective, make your reviewer enjoy reviewing your application, make it consistent formatting throughout, easy to read, classic margins, good font size, good font, don't use a crazy font, all these classic things that we kind of know, but it's easy to forget when we're in the flurry of pulling together a big package and we really want to put in those 3 more sentences. Well, you know what? You're just going to have to cut out 3 other sentences if those last 3 sentences mattered that much. So I would say for my learn and move your feet for this week, which is we learned a lot of things, what's something you can implement right away, is contemplate, what can you do to make your reviewer in the best mood possible? And maybe you're not applying for something right now. Maybe you're going to be applying for something soon. Maybe spend a little bit of time this week opening up your CV and just doing a quick read through, updating it. I'm terrible at updating my CV. I guess I will be now updating my CV at least once a year for my annual review. So that's good, I guess. It will be mostly up to date, at least at the most 11 and a half months out of date, since I'm sure I probably won't update it much more than that. But take a quick look. Is the formatting consistent? Does it make sense? Do you have some written statements kicking around, like a kind of stock cover letter that you can tweak to the right position? Is that formatting look good? Are you conveying who you want to convey? And maybe as the final learn and move your feet, I know I'm giving you multiple, but take what you will, is think about who would be that trusted reviewer. And if you haven't spoken to them for a while, maybe it's your advisor from grad school and you've been out of grad school for a few years, but that that's going to be a really good resource in the future. Maybe just touch base, ensure that relationship is still strong, still going, they're still around, they have the energy to help you. Maybe even just let them know, hey, I hope you're doing well. This is what's up with me. I'm not in a big hurry, but I'm thinking in the next couple years, I'm going to apply for this type of position. And that puts that in their mind, that even if the position that you're thinking of applying to isn't quite what they do, hey, maybe in 3 months, they're going to be at a conference and they're going to run into someone who does exactly what you want to do. And they're like, shoot, that's right. Anna wanted to go into this thing. Hey, I'm going to connect this person to Anna and let them talk. It doesn't hurt to let people know your long-term plans and just casually and just say, no rush, no stress, because then it's just in the back of people's mind and they can help you out slowly over time rather than trying to flurry around and help you out at the last minute. Hopefully this episode was helpful. I had a lot of fun. As always, this podcast is not affiliated with my teaching and research roles at Colorado State University, but it's a part of my belief that we can all have jobs that we love. We live in an algorithm world, so if you thought this was helpful, if you're working on your job applications, you have a friend who's about to start applying for big jobs, please share it with your friends. See if it's helpful for them. Subscribe, review, all those good things. Music by XSS on Instagram. You can hang out with me, STEMdenity, at Instagram or LinkedIn, Anna Hodshire. And if you make it to the end of the episode, I like to wrap this up with probably one of the most important things and most consistent things in my life, which is music. And I like to do a Song of the Week, things I'm really excited about right now. And I turned on YouTube. That sounds weird. Opened YouTube? Sure, whatever. I don't know, a month ago or so to KEXP. And KEXP, which if you don't know what KEXP is, it's a radio station out in the Pacific Northwest, and they do live recordings frequently of bands. And Gogo Bordello was on KEXP, and I was like, Gogo Bordello, you've been around for so long. I have not thought about you in years. I'm impressed. They just came out with a new album. I love their new album. It's super fun. I'm looking up the name of it. It's I mean We Mean It Man is the new album name, and there's two songs I love off of that. But the one I'm going to choose today is the one that we're talking about jobs. And of course, the downside of applying for jobs is that you're probably going to apply for way more jobs than you actually get. You're either going to be rejected or you'll never even hear back from the applicants. It's happened to me frequently when I was in periods where I was applying for jobs. Didn't hear back from most of them, was rejected from the other ones, right? This is a normal part of life. It sucks. And if you're really excited about the job you're applying for, it can be a big blow. It can really drag you down for a little bit. But there's always good things. The next best thing is coming along. You didn't get that job for a reason. That's what I believe. And Gogo Badal put out a great song called Life is Possible Again. It's super fun, super dancey. Check it out, especially if you're feeling down about jobs, or, maybe in a few months when you're feeling down about jobs, whenever. The song is there for you, just like music is always there for you. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I had fun talking about it, and we'll talk next week.